So I'm Dan Katz from the University of Illinois. We also have Lars, do you want to just, yep, Lars Eklund from, sorry, I don't remember.
Well, I'm from National Bioinformatics Sweden and
Okay.
Uppsala University
Okay.
in Sweden.
All right. Yeah, and so we're going to do this together. This group has a lot of co-chairs. Most of them are in Europe and are not here. And this, I believe, is also not a time that's great for Europe, so I'm not really expecting a lot of them to be online, but we'll see. Oh, sorry, and I also am supposed to be paying attention to the chat for questions. Okay, and we already have a question? No, we don't. Okay, all right. Sorry, let's do this way. So, oh, okay. Right, everybody knows this, I think, but just to kind of say a little bit, this is a group that started maybe 3-ish years ago, something like that, looking at basically how does FAIR apply to the world of machine learning. This was at the time where we were unsure if we should say AI or machine learning, and we chose machine learning. Maybe we would say AI today, but maybe we also would focus on machine learning still. The two things that we're particularly interested in, so this started as an interest group, and we basically tried to see what different people wanted to focus on. And we've created 2 different activities, one on metadata and one on life cycles, and so we'll talk about both of those as we go forward. Okay. So we have this acknowledgement of country, where we acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay our respects to their elders past and present, and I think we're supposed to say future as well. I don't actually quite know the right word, but I keep hearing future, so it seems like that's an important thing. And there's this slide that you've probably seen a number of times. But I will just mention that if you are a new RDA member, RDA does have these 6 principles, and we are working under an RDA code of conduct. And if you want to talk about any of that, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. Or there's an RDA booth upstairs where people will be even more happy to talk about it. All right. Again, we have a collaborative notes document as well as these slides that are both available. I mentioned the code of conduct. If you have questions, you can put up your hand and we have a microphone that can come around to you, or you can ask questions in the chat and I hopefully will see them, or maybe Lars will see them as well, and we'll try to get to them that way. If you're online, then that's clearly the way to go ahead. And the collaborative notes document is really intended to be a place that if you have a comment, if you have something you think the group should look at and you don't want to ask a question, but you just want a record of it that we'll look at later, please just jot down a note there and that's fine. All right, so what we are going to do then is again, a little bit of introduction, a little bit about the group itself. As I mentioned, 2 task forces, one on the machine learning lifecycle that I will talk about kind of what we've done, and then we'll have an activity. And then Lars will talk about the machine learning model metadata, and then there will be also some activity there as well. We finally then will wrap up. Sorry, this is a little bit strange. I think we maybe didn't update something. I don't think we're actually going to have flash talks from audience participants, but if there is something that comes up that anybody wants to introduce, a project they're working on or something else, I'd be happy to give a few minutes for anybody to talk about those things. And basically, the idea of an interest group is that it isn't actually working to do a thing and it doesn't have to end. And so if there's relevant things that we should be aware of, then this is a good way to do those things. Okay, so then let's start. So again, the idea here was that there were a number of different things that we were thinking about in terms of how does FAIR apply to machine learning. And in particular, we were thinking of machine learning as being a life cycle, which includes building a model and sharing a model and other things along the way, using a model. And so FAIR could apply to each of those different stages a little bit differently, and we'll get to that as we go forward. and then metadata was the other kind of large thing. And so when we started the group again, we were thinking about possible outcomes being use cases that are relevant, definitions, recommendations and guidance documents, technical specifications, and then possibly training. And I guess the other thing that's actually not on here is really community building. So there's a number of different groups, a number of different activities that are all working more or less in the same space, and we wanted this to potentially be a place that they could come together and talk to each other, and where we need common things to develop those common things, and where we just need to share information to share information. And so just to give a little bit of an example of this, if we think about the kind of machine learning, there's a number of different kinds of activities and different kinds of organizations. And so there's different platforms that exist. There's platforms in which people either build models or share models. And these first 4 things under platforms are examples of these, from Gardens, which is a project at kind of led at Argonne National Lab in the US, OpenML, Hugging Face, Kipoi. So some of these are general, some of them are focused on Kipoi and genomics, right, Hugging Face being quite general. There's also communities that are involved, and so we see these 4 communities in particular as ones that expressed interest in this group at the beginning. The Pistoia Alliance, which is in Lifecycle, Life Sciences. Elixir, European I guess also Life Sciences Organization. Cairn, AI Laboratories in Europe. NFDI for data science, the German data science infrastructure activity, as well as projects. And so these were just a few projects that were going on at the time that we started again. One that was looking at basically how to apply fair understanding into AI as used in high energy physics. One that was looking at AI in high performance computing, and one that was looking at fair HPC data sets and the use of them for AI and ML analysis. If you have others, this is, again, a place that we'd be happy to get any comments on the collaborative notes. If there are projects we should be reaching out to, organizations we should be reaching out to, again, we're eager to do things like that. If you are interested in joining, this is a standard RDA interest group, so it has a mailing list that's associated with membership, and if you join the group, then you'll get the emails. We have monthly meetings on Zoom, and they alternate between basically 800 and 2000 UTC, and that's intended to try to cover different regions of the world. So some of these are very bad for me in the US, and others are probably bad for other people in other places, but overall, then this lets us communicate and chat with each other every couple of months. We do have these 2 task forces. Again, one is on fair things aligned to the machine learning lifecycle. The other is on metadata schema for machine learning models. You can join either of those, and then you'll find out kind of where either of them are, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about one, and Lars will talk about 2 as we go forward as well. There also is the way that you can contribute to the documents that are being drafted. And Task Force 2 in particular has a document that has some consultation. And everything, well, I shouldn't say everything, but most things are happening in GitHub. That's the platform we're using for sharing and for collaborating. Again, if you have the slides from the link, then you can click on any of these links. Okay, so today what we want to then do is to review and discuss what we've been doing in terms of the machine learning lifecycle. Basically, how do we apply FAIR principles to the different stages? Does this lifecycle actually match the lifecycle that has been proposed in the Skills for EOSC project? And then there also are some FAIR practices for AI research that have been developed in another project, and we're going to try to talk about those latter 2, and that'll be the subject of the exercise a bit. And then we're also going to then review and discuss efforts around metadata. And if there are new activities that anybody's interested in, new use cases, new things that anybody thinks that this group should be working on, that'll be the last topic. And yeah, and those two things listed then down at the bottom. Do I see a dot? Oh, there's a very, very faint dot. Sorry, I won't use that. The last two things down at the bottom then are, again, the two task forces that we have at this point. Okay, so then moving into task force 1, which is the machine learning lifecycle for FAIR for machine learning. What we want to do is talk about what we've done up to this point, and then also talk about, sorry, just trying to make sure I can see questions if they come in, and then kind of go through two of these things that have been created outside of this group and talk about how they overlap and if either of them or a combination of them really is what we should be trying to use in the group going forward. So the overall task force was trying to study how the FAIR principles are applied to machine learning. And a lot of us came out of the FAIR for Research software activity that happened before this, and that was basically a group that looked at the original FAIR principles, realized that those principles had text that said that they were intended to apply to all outputs, but then if you look at the principles themselves, they very clearly say data everywhere, and they don't actually say outputs. And so we wanted to try to look at it and understand what would we need to do to apply these to software. And at the same time, there was another group that was looking at how to apply the FAIR principles to workflows. Again, the basic principles make sense, but how they apply to other objects that aren't data really depend on what those other objects are and how they're different than data. And so then we started thinking about machine learning models, and we started thinking, is a machine learning model really data? And in some sense it is, because it's a set of parameters, a set of weights, and options for a particular framework. And then we thought, well, is a machine learning model software? And yeah, it is. It's also software because it's an executable object that takes input and produces output. Right? And data sets don't process data. Right? They are data. So in some sense, it is software. And in machine learning models are also a combination of data and software and workflows. And if you saw the plenary in the big room this morning, sorry, there were two different plenaries going on, but the one in the plaza level, workflows showed up a lot in that related to models. I would say software didn't, and data was, of course, the predominant characteristic here at RDA. And maybe models actually aren't any of these things. Maybe they're really something else. And so that's what we were trying to look at. And we've been working to make progress on a white paper on this subject. We have done a literature review, and there's more work that can be done on that because there's always more literature being published, but we felt like it was somewhat complete at a particular point. Again, the literature review, the life cycle, and well, at least the literature review and lifecycle are in the in the GitHub repository where we're doing work. And so if you're interested, you can get to those. I think the literature review actually is probably a Google Doc, actually, but it's linked from GitHub. And so if we then could define the lifecycle based on the literature review, then the next step would be to define FAIR and how it applies to each part of the lifecycle, and that is in progress. Sorry, duplicated. So, okay, yeah, sorry, so in detail. So the literature review, again, we've done some version of this. It is ongoing. There is a Google Doc that captures where we were. There's a Zotero collection as well that you can get to. And if you're interested in looking at this and contributing to it, to adding anything else, we welcome more contributions. But we did use that and then ran a mini hackathon that I'll just say ZBMed, sorry, I'm not sure if it's ZBMed or ZBMed. Anyhow, the ZBMed in Germany did, and that led to a simplified structure of the machine learning lifecycle, and they also then did a first attempt at how FAIR would apply to different parts of that, and that was documented in a report or a preprint that's on Zenodo. I'm just going to kind of show this and maybe try to talk about it very briefly. To the AV person in the back, if I walk around slightly, or is the camera still going to work? Is that okay? All right. Okay, so let me try to do this. So what we have then in terms of the life cycle that we came up with is, I'll see if this works a little bit. Yeah, so a problem definition at the top. Then there is a effectively data gathering as well as model selection, and these could be done in parallel. So there's a data gathering path on the left and a model selection path on the right. The data gathering path gathers data, does pre-processing. In the model selection path, there is actually a model selection, creation, evaluation, and obviously these need to interact. But at some point we get to a model that we think could be good, and that model then can be validated, and if it's not good, then we can go back either way, different method, different data sets, other changes. We get to a model that we're happy with. We then deploy it and monitor its usage as well as storing it and sharing it, and then somebody else can pick it up and reuse it. And this reuse then maybe involves fine-tuning or new data or something else, and so there's a number of different cycles that show up in this. And so this is what we've been thinking about as the machine learning lifecycle that we're using in this work. So that then is, it's 10 steps, pretty broadly defined. It's maybe simplified in some ways, maybe not. Right? There's clearly things that we didn't look at, things like publication, things like documentation, really continuous monitoring. And we didn't really look at the life cycle of the data that's being used here at all, or the life cycle of the software that actually is implementing the models. But those things also could be important. So this was again, the life cycle that we came up with. If anybody has any questions, please feel free just to raise your hand and we can talk about anything. I don't know if there's anything really controversial about this, but okay, keep going. Yeah, and so this is then, this is in the report, and what we've then done is to start working on a table that says for each of these 10 steps, how does FAIR apply? Right, so what is FAIR, how would you apply FAIR when you're doing a problem definition? How would you apply FAIR when you're doing data gathering, when you're doing model selection, when you're doing model storage and sharing, when you're doing reuse? And all of those potentially have different answers. And that's part of the reason that we actually, at this point, as an interest group, have not come up with a definition of what FAIR means for machine learning models, because we think there's probably multiple definitions and different definitions apply at different stages. And we're not actually sure if they can be combined. But we'll get to a couple of other groups that do think that there is a definition, and that's what we'd like to, again, talk about in the interactive part that's coming in just a moment. Okay, again, everything that's here is in the links that will keep showing up occasionally for the notes and for the slides. Right, so once this happened then, and in Plenary 20, the Skills for ESC project started a Delphi survey that was called Top 10 Fair Data Things for AI. And I can't really define a Delphi survey very well, even though I was one of the people that did this, but it is kind of an interactive and quite structured process that tries to gather inputs and come up with an output. And so there was a set of experts that were initially involved in defining a survey. Then the survey actually went out, and then once the survey results came back, there was a bunch of discussion. And this then led to a deliverable that was submitted and approved by the Skills for ES coordinators. And there's a top 10 booklet that was produced as a way of taking a look at this. And so that's in the previous slide. I'll just kind of say briefly that these top 10 things, when people were looking at them, they weren't thinking about kind of where they fit, whether they were findable, accessible, interoperable, or reusable. They were thinking about them more holistically, kind of just what are the important things that we need to think about. After these were done, then the Skills for ES group basically went back and they looked at each of these things and they tried to assign them to either findable, accessible, interoperable, or reusable. And that's the colors on the top, the boxes on the top, as well as the small squares in each of the 10 things. And so what you can see is that most of these top 10 things don't necessarily apply just to one category, one findable, one accessible, and most of them are actually applying to two. And one of the questions maybe that comes up with that is, does the idea of FAIR principles, where you break up principles into one of these four categories, which seems to work for data, does that really make sense for machine learning models, or is that not really the right framework at all, and we should be thinking a little bit differently? We don't know yet. So, oh, and I guess, sorry, let me go back for a second. Let's see where we are on time. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these. These are in the collaborative notes document, and so you can see them there, and again, we'll talk about them just in a couple more slides, so let me just keep going for the minute. So that was one activity that happened kind of a little bit outside of the group, although in collaboration with the group. And then there's a second activity that happened, which was that NFDI did some work that they called FAIR for Machine Learning Model. And in this set of work, they came up with 21 principles, which they would say are the FAIR for Machine Learning Model principles, or the, I guess it's just FAIR4ML model. Of those 21 principles, 15 of them were from the FAIR for Research Software principles, and one was from the original FAIR principle. So according to this group, FAIR for machine learning models is much more like FAIR for software than it is FAIR for data. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but that was, again, what came out. And there were also then 5 new principles that they felt like they needed to come up with that were specific to models that didn't actually match either software or data. They also developed 27 assessment metrics, and each of them has at least one way that you can actually test it or measure it. So they're not just an arbitrary metric, but they're, I guess, effectively like a smart metric, measurable metric. And of those 27, 17 of them are coming from DOME, and I actually don't remember exactly what DOME stands for. Does anybody else? No, okay. So I think DOME came out of the Elixir work, and it was related to FAIR in the context of Elixir, but I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for. Yeah, 2 are from DMM, and I actually am not completely sure I can tell you what DMM is either for the moment. Sorry, I was not part of this NFDI group. And 8 of them were new. And in addition, then, they said if they have principles and they have assessment metrics, then maybe they can build a tool that actually can do fair assessment of ML models. And so they worked on that. They wrote a paper about it that's going to be presented, I think next month is CIKM, I believe. I don't remember where it is. And they turned this then into a tool. The tool is not available online, but it is available as source code that is on GitHub. And it's MIT licensed, and if you're interested, you can download it, and then you can actually just run it on any ML model and see what it does. And the details of this then, again, are in a Zenodo report. Okay, so again, interest group started off by creating a lifecycle, then 2 different groups went off and started doing work about kind of what does FAIR mean overall. And so what we would like to do at this point is to look at the shared document and to look at the 2 different outputs that have been created, the NFDI output and the skills for EASC output, and to talk about, let me actually, sorry. Let me switch, I'm going to switch a couple of things for a second. So, okay, so I'm just going to go to this slide for a second because it has the links again to the notes and to the slides. And so if anybody wants to participate in this thing that we're going to try to do for about 20 minutes or so, please do go to this tiny URL for the notes. This was the same thing that was on the QR code at the beginning of the presentation. I'm going to jump back up to the QR code for a minute. Okay, so these are the QR codes again. And once it seems like everybody's okay, then I'm going to go into the collaborative notes document and just try to walk through it a little bit. And again, the questions that we're going to ask are just to take a little bit of time and to look at these different things and to see what you think. Okay. And if you pick either one of these, the notes or the slides, there's a link to the other one. So you don't actually have to click on both, but we're going to look at the notes. Okay, so let me try to do that for a second. Okay, so this is the notes document. Please feel free to add yourself as an attendee, which I see some people have done. Feel free to add more rows as well if you need to. And then basically what we want to do here is to look at these two different documents, the NFDI FAIR4ML model and the skills for EOSC, top 10 FAIR things. And the way that I've kind of set this up is that I've put things that are related to findability together. And so these are the NFDI principles that are related to findability. These are the skills for EOSC top 10 things that are related to findability. So we have the findability part, we have the accessibility part, and so forth. Again, I'm hoping that you're looking at this and you don't need to look at it on the screen. But what we'd like to do is basically just to take some time, look at these things and tell us what doesn't make sense. All right, are there things that are in the wrong place? Are there things that don't actually apply to? Okay. All right, maybe this would be more interesting with a soundtrack. I don't know. So yeah, so we'd like just to think about these things. You feel free to write things down in the notes if you see, again, something that just you don't understand it. We're happy for you to write it down. If anybody wants to talk about anything, like this NFDI point and this skills for EOS point are really the same thing, or these are really saying completely different things and you can't do both, we would be interested in kind of thinking about that. And again, I guess I'm going to kind of leave this here for, I don't know, 3 or 5 minutes so that you have actually some time to look at these. And then we can start actually talking about them. And again, please feel free to write anything down as well. Yes? Did I have the QR code again? Yes. Yeah, sorry, I guess this isn't very, this is probably not very phone friendly if you just have a phone. Again, maybe we'll just put some of this up here as well if that's easier for anybody to look at as we start. Yeah.
Document refers to ARDC 23 in the QR code, and yours is on the screen next to 25. Are they different documents?
Sorry, so if,
I'm sorry, David, but your link remitted me to Costa Rica document.
okay, so was that the notes document or the slide?
Yeah.
Okay. So I apologize, maybe something went wrong with that piece. No, it could be that when we updated the QR code, maybe maybe this didn't get updated right, or there was a copy and paste error. Let me actually just ask. The easiest thing to do is if you just type in the URL, if the QR code hasn't worked. So again, the URLs are right, but it could be that one of the QR codes didn't get updated correctly, or again, there was a copy and paste error when I tried to copy a QR code and tried to paste and copied instead or something like that. So it's pretty straightforward URLs, tinyurl.com, RDA-P25-FAIR4ML-notes or slides. Sorry, I'll just try this as well for a second. Okay, I apologize. These are, yeah, both the QR codes are not right. I am sorry about that. Okay, please ignore the arrows and just, if you can just use the URL, sorry. Okay, I'm going to go back to the document. Okay, I see a few people typing in things, which is very nice. And I see some comments people are making as well, which is good, so thank you. Oh. Sorry, I see a typo. Okay. Does anybody want to just kind of say anything about any of these while other people are typing? I will say one of the discussions that we had was the fact that NFDI has come up with 21 principles. To us, seemed like maybe it was too many. And so we were hoping maybe there were some that weren't needed or could be combined. But I don't know. And again, the fact that we had these two different groups that went through quite different processes also seemed like it potentially was useful. I will say the NFDI group did a comparison of their work against the Skills for EOS group, and so that also exists in that report that was linked on Zenodo on one of the slides. But I didn't really want to talk about that. I wanted to try to see if people kind of independently had opinions about, again, what made sense, what didn't. Again, if anybody wants to speak up, that would be great. If not, I will look at some of the things that people are writing, and maybe we can chat about those briefly. All right, so let's see what people are writing. Oops, Sorry, I'm very bad at Windows touchpads as well. So we have under interoperability a question that if the model metadata should use a documented, accessible, and broadly used format, if that implies machine readability. And I actually don't think that it does. I think the machine readability would be kind of an extra piece, but I don't think it's a strict requirement. Right, okay, so one of the NFDI pieces says a machine learning model offers its serialized knowledge. So what does serialized knowledge mean? Now, I probably should have asked before, but is there anybody here that was part of either of these projects that came up with either of these things? Okay, if there was somebody from NFDI here, then I could ask them this question. That would be great. And if not, I could make fun of their choice of words, which probably wouldn't be as good. But, sorry, did you, yeah?
We're in the Skills for EOSC project, which concluded, so Daniel Bang at TU Delft. But I think it's well documented there. Nothing further to add. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, and can you say that again? You were part of the Skills for EOSC project?
Yes.
Okay, but not the NFDI project?
No, no.
Okay, so that's the question, I guess, at this point, but okay, thank you. Yeah, please, so then please feel free to correct me when I say something wrong as well, so. Okay. Yeah, so I think maybe I would say serialized knowledge, it's kind of embedded knowledge. It's effectively the weights in the model, I think, would be my interpretation, but I'm not completely sure. But it's good to understand that that needs to be clarified. Yeah, so let's see. Machine learning model is associated with detailed provenance. What does that mean? Yeah, I mean, so I think that actually means more than unique identifiers for models that were built upon. I think it also means unique identifiers for the data that was used, as well as for the actual work that was done in order to train the model. And so there could be some kind of machine characteristics in that, or some kind of parameters, or something else. I guess I'm thinking of detailed provenance being a detailed list of all the inputs and all the steps that were used to create the output. Again, if anybody wants to comment on any of these things, that's fine. I don't need to necessarily give my opinions on any of them. So if somebody else has an opinion, that would be great. If anybody else wants to ask a question, that's fine as well. But we'll kind of going through. In findability, the skills for EOSC ones are duplicates but are better formed. Skills for EOSC is always using ML AI, NFDI is using only ML, okay. I'm not sure who wrote that, if they're here, but is the implication there that the findability, the skills for EOSC from findability are better than the NFDI version and are also simpler, and maybe that's just what should be used and we could get rid of some of the NFDI pieces? At least that's how I read this comment, but I don't know who made it. Yeah.
Yes, this is what I meant, meaning that the skills for EOSC seems better form. So I think they are more precise. So I think, in my opinion, they are better than NFDI for this findability aspect.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, can you just introduce yourself as well?
I'm Christian Paget from Surfax in Toulouse in France.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'm guessing potentially you made the comment that's next about accessibility as well. So thank you for that. That's an extremely clear comment. So yeah, so I think things like this are very helpful when we have guidance. And if it's in some ways this like kind of this actionable comment that tells us, gives us an idea of what to do is very nice. Let's see, is the focus here only on the models and not on the training data? I think that that's mostly right, but I don't actually want to say that for sure because, again, from the point of view of the interest group, we actually were thinking about the training data having its own FAIR principles, and the work on using the training data to build a model actually as a different, potentially a different set of FAIR principles. So I think the focus here being on the models is correct, but that's not to say that there isn't a focus on the data as well. It just isn't the focus of this interest group's work. Somebody knows DOME. And actually, this is a different DOME, D-O-M-E, and not D-O-A-M, which I thought was actually the right spelling of DOME, so I'm not completely sure of the other. Let's see, a question about NFDI. Should the identifiers be human readable or only identified by machines? I don't know. That's a good question. I guess I go back to the principle that is in the DOI implementation guidelines that says that a DOI should not be human readable and it should only be interpretable by a machine, even though Zenodo and Figshare and others don't agree with that and have embedded semantic meaning into the DOI itself as well. But I think that's a very good question. If anybody has an opinion. I mean, I guess it's clearly important for models to have names and also that they have identifiers, but whether or not the name and the identifier need to be the same thing is unclear. Okay. Let's see, so some feedback on reusability. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I guess the way that I'm thinking about this is that the training is done on a subset of the data, and then you use a different part of the data for the validation, and which you use and how you split it is important for reusability, and that makes sense, and that should be recorded, I think. Okay, so there is so somebody here knows about DOME, because they're typing in comments. Who is that? Okay, thank you. Would you be willing to just kind of say a little bit about DOME and kind of how it relates here? Yeah. Sorry, with the microphone, 1 second. So. And please introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so my name is Nils Hoffmann. I'm part of Elixir Germany, and I was involved in the later stages of DOME a little bit. So DOME is about basically defining sensible metadata for reproducibility for supervised machine learning models primarily. And these recommendations have been put out a while ago. There's now a DOME registry available also, where I think GigaScience is also now publishing references to machine learning models. So DOME stands for data. I just have to look it up again, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, data optimization.
Data optimization
yeah.
model and evaluation, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Again, does anybody want to say anything about these? Or if you were challenged to look at these two things and come up with a set of principles, would you be able to? Does it seem like we have all the information here that's needed? Is there something that you would say doesn't make sense and we should get rid of?
I think DOME is there to report on experiments. It's on experiments, not on model. It includes a bit more information than the possible at the moment.
Okay, so just for folks, a comment that DOME is focused mostly on experiments and not on the model, and then an answer that DOME also does include some data about the models as well. Sorry, the microphone didn't quite make it in time. Two people too far apart. So, yes, one more. Sorry, can we go just to the person in the back to finish up for a second, then we'll come back up? Thanks.
So, Patrick Rusch, Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics. So earlier you said that there is the machine learning or the AI and there are the data. But I think this separation does not exist really. I mean, one is necessarily subsumed by the other. So that's why DOME has to do both.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Glenn Charlton, Intersect. I guess my comment it's probably almost contradictory to the last comment, but I think it's important to separate the training data from the model itself. The model itself is often de-identified from like single person identifiers in the way it comes. So when you're working with more even semi-sensitive data, the model removes a lot of, like the data that's stored within the model is not as identifiable as the training data itself may be.
Okay, I think that's fair.
I think it's an important distinction. Yeah.
I guess the other thing to me is that the data does have value and stands on its own as well, whereas it's not clear, well, I don't know. I was going to say maybe it's not clear that the model makes sense without the data, but maybe that's what you're saying, is that the model actually does, yeah.
The weights of the model.
The weights, yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So again, yeah, thanks for folks that are putting stuff in. Thank you, Scott. I don't actually see Scott. Maybe online? Okay.
This was one of the reasons that we started with the interest group, that we felt that there is...
Sorry, can you...
One of the reasons when we started this interest group, that we were looking at it, was exactly this that you were saying here, that the model itself, the weights of the model, and contribute in a way that the data does not. So that's why you need an extended form of metadata and more things than just what exists for data, because it stands on its own. It's not just data. It's not hard linked to a specific set of data, because you have a second layer of abstraction. And then that's why we need these extended ideas that come.
Okay, and yeah, and thank you, Scott Online. That's great. It's nice to know that the technology is working. And just to mention, as Scott put in as a comment, that he presented yesterday on GigaScience that has been implementing the DOME-ML standards in their ML papers. So that work has been happening. And there's a preprint available as well that you can get to from the comments. I guess the other question that is maybe worth I'll just wait maybe 1 more minute or 2 more minutes, and just is, do you see anything of any of these lines that are in there that you just think we should just get rid of? There was the comment initially for the findability part that maybe we could get rid of all the NFDI part, and it was all subsumed in the skills for EOSC, which should be great. We certainly would like to try to figure out how to simplify this as much as possible. And I think the other thing that we really feel like, again, as I said before, is a challenge, is that the way that these two things are looking, in some ways they're combining the different parts of the life cycle, and I think they're mostly focusing on the model itself, whereas we think that there potentially are different parts of FAIR that apply to different parts of the life cycle before you actually get to a model. So I think that's work that we still need to do, again, and this will happen in this Task Force 1. And so if you're interested, again, please feel free to join the group and join Task Force 1 if that's an interesting topic. Any thoughts from anybody? Is there anything that we should just get rid of? Yeah, Claudia?
It's just a comment. The ethics issue in one of the items, I think it's the reusability, right? Yeah, any ethical considerations. This is extremely important, but it has to be extended because it's too vague. I could have written it down, but it takes me 1 year per letter in my phone, so I just hope someone can remember this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's, I mean, that one's actually interesting to me. Sorry, the person that was on the skills for EOSC before, can you say anything about kind of this ethics part in particular, just given that none of the FAIR principles for the original ones for data, for software, for workflows have mentioned ethics, and so kind of why did this come up here?
Yeah, I don't think I can add any more further detail there, but I think Curtis would be the one to check in with.
Okay.
And it could also be that there might be, because it was restricted to 10, there might be others that are worth looking at or just reviewing as well.
Okay. Okay, and so I think actually you've answered you've helped me remember how to answer my question now, which is that these top 10 things that came out of the Skills for EOSC work were not actually directly applied. They didn't come in the context of FAIR, right? They came in the context of 10 most important things. And so that actually probably is why ethics shows up there, but it doesn't show up in FAIR because FAIR is limited in some way and it doesn't include all the important things. It just includes the things that are related to findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. So, okay, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I guess in some sense this is where things like the CARE principles are coming in as well as these things that go beyond FAIR. Okay. Okay. Again, the notes will be open for a while. Please, if you have further comments, please feel free to add anything else. I am going to go back to the slides and I'll turn this over to Lars, I believe. If I can find the right place. Okay.
So, hello everyone. My name is Lars Eklund. I have been part of this working group for some time, almost since the beginning. I am going to present the second task force that we're currently running. And that is trying to generate a metadata schema that can be used, among other things, to bridge between different repositories. Because currently there is a lot of some have some things and some others have other things that they take up. And this metadata schema is we're trying to be relatively complete. So you will see, among other things, a field for ethics, which might not be in everywhere. Lately we have used the croissant model to sort of make this metadata schema more usable and with more close to what is used out there as a standard. We have also found other related schemas, but there are many more that we probably should be considering. And this is one of the places we will need your help in trying to figure out if there are more metadata schemas that are related to machine learning. So there are two tasks that we are basically doing. We're developing in Task Force 2, we're developing the actual metadata schemas, and we're also trying to do crossworks to figure out what is common among other things. So we have previously done a literature review with controlled variables. Most of this information is best found through the GitHub. So as you explore the GitHub later, you will be able to get a lot of the information that we have about how we are approaching this and how we want to have your input. So we started with machine learning model cards as our initial reference points, kind of like Hugging Face and other places like that. From that, we started to try through a series of hackathons to generate crosswalks to figure out which was the common models, and then we were able to generate a schema. Let's see if this actually works. So the metadata schema that we have generated so far is a draft, and you can see that it has several different tasks and it has several different parts to it. And let me see if I can. We have these things that are generated that are what's it called, controlled vocabularies. So they each field corresponds to a vocabulary element of some sort, either for the model or for things that are related to the models, like data sets, articles, organizations that have created the model, and so on. As you can see, we have some extended ones. These are, as you saw, before in FAIR, as Dan said, you don't have the ethical and legal and social parts as much, nor has CO2 been a consideration. So we have suggested that this should be added to existing models. And the different colors in this schema compares to where we have collected the common namespaces and the common spaces of this. Yes, sorry for the bumping. I'm also not the best with the touchpad. Let me go back. So this has generated data models, and a data schema. Here we go. Which then has several points. You saw the model before described, and you have for the evaluation. So they each corresponds to the different tasks and places in the life cycle. The idea is to generate something that is similar to model cards. If you follow to the GitHub link, it is where we discuss these things in a lot of more detail. Let me see if I can find the proper GitHub, because it is better to go to that page. And sorry, give me a minute. Sorry that the links are a bit wonky. I will post the proper link to the GitHub in the collaborative notes, so you can easily find it from the FAIR4ML GitHub. So just add it to the bottom. So there, and then if I switch to the collaborative notes. There we go, and notes, and then at the bottom, have this. So this is the place where we have the important ways for you to interact with us in that are working with the task force too, and to easily become involved. And that is, there is both a discussion document that relates to the INES adaptation of the file, and that is this first one. Then there are links to the actual corresponding model schema versions and the latest version of it. And the other things that we have is that we have both, you can open issues on the GitHub. That is a very easy way of generating and a good way to get it controlled, because then it's version controlled. But if you don't feel particularly comfortable with working with GitHub issues, there is a Google Sheet that links to, this Google Sheet links to the actual, so where we have all the properties and all the things related to the FAIR4ML model, and where we get it from, the definition, range, and descriptions. And these you can add to by adding to these comments or adding things to these document. And the other, so this is the actual schema that you find. And it's with both the evaluation part and the model part and the data parts. And then in this document, we have two crosswalks of alignment between these two, Ines data and CBMed. So these are following the same principles and going through which ones are connected to what. And that has given rise to these versions. Now the second thing that we can do, let me go back there. So the other thing way to generate a good interaction is to click on the issues. And here you can see comments that we have worked with recently, and that has been added. With enhancement means that it doesn't exist already. Here is something that simply isn't working the way it's not as it's supposed to. And here is a general comment on maybe how we could use value, for example, for CO2 emissions rather than text, so that it can be more machine accessible. So this is the general gist of this, what Task Force 2 has been up to. We, of course, like all groups, desperately need your help for this to proceed, because we come only so long when we are sitting on our own. And I think I will look a little bit on, so what we want for next steps is kind of the same as we did before in there. We will again generate an online hackathon. This one leads to the previous one we had. We will again start a new one. There will be another period to try and get more feedback and to update the version 0.1 that now exists on the current website. What we're also looking for is more early adopters, more people that want to see if the schema actually works when they are working with models, because it's not until we actually try it and test it against the actual science out there that we can see if it is a workable schema and model that sort of can have viability. Yes, so comments and going through the public repository and generating issues is the fastest and easiest way to do that. Again, we're going to start up another hackathon in a bit, and that hackathon will be announced on the RDA webpage. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So it's funny. I was looking at this on my laptop, and for some reason the QR codes on my laptop work fine. So
Yeah, that's because I changed them.
you changed them. Okay. I was thinking somebody changed them. It was very interesting. So I thought maybe somebody here changed the QR codes, which was good. Okay.
Now the QR codes work on them, but the QR
All right.
codes here
Perfect.
shouldn't
Thank
work
you.
because this is
Right, okay. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, so that's the two task forces. That was really the main thing that we wanted to talk about and try to just give some sense of the two different things that we're working on at this point. We also, in the remaining time, we could do multiple things. If there is any related project that anybody wants to bring up, again, a project that you're working on that we should be aware of, that wants to collaborate, that wants to work together, or a project that you know of that we should just be aware of and reach out to, either of those things would be great. If you want to talk about a project that you're doing that is related to FAIR for machine learning, we'd be happy to give you a couple of minutes just to talk as well. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Yeah, sorry, just let the microphone come around. And can you, of course, introduce yourself as well? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Christy Holmes, and I'm at Northwestern University in the U.S. And I'm new to this discussion, so I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. So I'm wondering, in the context of the two task groups, are you satisfied with the literature searches that you've done? Do you feel like that's work that's complete, or is that an area where you'd like to try and have a more systematic approach to generating a scoping review, for instance, of this? So maybe that's my first question. What do you think, Dan?
Right. So I think I would say in general for the work that's being done in Task Force 2, I don't really feel like there's something that we've missed. I think that we probably know the relevant activities, and I think whether or not we're being successful in developing something and whether or not it works for something is a different question, but I think I don't think there's a literature review question there. For Task Force 1 and the life cycle, I think there is potentially a literature review question. Again, we did a review, and that was what we used to come up with that 10-step life cycle. And so on one side, further literature review isn't necessarily going to change that, but maybe we should build a new version at some point. I think the other thing that would be relevant is there other work that we did miss, which is much more likely, I think, for Task Force 1. Okay. And so I think the answer potentially is yes for Task Force 1 and no probably for Task Force 2.
Okay.
I would agree that that's the same thing. I would say that Task Force 2 mostly needs us to kind of refine the model. Sorry, I should come up here.
Okay, thanks.
So you can stay. So anyway, I would say for Task Force 2, the value of when you're creating a model like this, the value of generating of having a scoping review is when you start from nothing. But now we are already connected to many of the major ones. There are many that we probably may have missed, but the best way to integrate them is not by trying to go look for them in a literature review, but rather to look for them by asking people that are involved in these projects and these creations of different model schemas and different data schemas to come and incorporate them through issues and through these live documents that we have, so that we just build on them rather than trying to sort of roll back and come again at the problem.
Okay. And then would you say that you're primarily thinking about this in the context of continuous improvement, or are there specific areas that you'd like to nurture in either of these groups? I mean, I'm new to this. That's probably very evident right now.
Right. So I guess my opinion would be we started because there were a group of us that were just interested in trying to think about this question, about really how does FAIR apply to machine learning, and what can we do to make machine learning models more fair, the acronym FAIR. And so when we had our initial meetings, we started thinking about it, and we basically said, well, here are the two things that we'd like to think about, right? What does FAIR actually mean in this context? And if we want to make things fair, how do we deal with the metadata that we think is really one of the core elements of that? So I don't know that I would say that either of those are exactly a continuous improvement. Both of them are in some ways, I don't know, products that are delivered, and those products maybe will change over time as the landscape changes, but they don't really need to change continuously. Right, if there's some large change, if I don't know, if there's like some different metadata schema that becomes popular, or there's some new platform that arises, and that's the way people start sharing models on, I don't know, it's hard for me to even imagine what that would be, but I mean, so I think there, like, dramatic landscape changes, I think, would lead to different versions of the things that we're looking at. But otherwise, I don't know that we feel like there's a need to kind of continuously be updating things.
Okay.
But I guess the other part of this is that these two task forces are what the group of people that started this, as well as when we started having some calls, what people were interested in. And so if there are other things that somebody wants to do in this context, this is an RDA interest group, it's not a working group. So it doesn't have to end, it doesn't have to have a deliverable, we can keep adding things to it, we can keep incorporating more things over time. And so if you feel like there's something that you're interested in this area, then you can propose it, and if we get a few people that are interested on a call, then that'll be Task Force 3.
Okay, yeah, that's...
If it's large enough, we can spin off working groups from this. If there's a very large, something that has a very large scope that are outside of this, but wants to have a well-defined scope, then one can think about creating a working group from this. There's something that we can do as well. So that's also one way of attacking a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say that the reason that we did these two things as task forces rather than starting to spin off working groups is we didn't actually think that we could do either one in 18 months, which is the kind of the working group period. So.
Okay, I really appreciate your kind consideration of my questions. And I think maybe my last one would be, are you considering any specific user communities for testing? So we're launching a large collaborative intelligence network at Northwestern that's meant to be quite interdisciplinary, because we have lots of people who are working on artificial intelligence and machine learning and across different disciplines. And so, you know, I'd be very interested in the testing aspect of this, I think, in the context of this cross-disciplinary initiative.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the reason that people became interested in this was generally because they had something in their projects and their organizations that made this relevant. And so the testing that I think we're basically going to do is from the people that are involved that want to try this out. And so I think we certainly would welcome anybody else that wants to, whether that's right your project, the Northwestern activity, or anybody else. So, yeah.
Hi, Joonas Kesäniemi from CSC IT Center for Science in Finland. This is kind of a side note maybe, but I act as a co-chair of the FAIR Mappings Working Group, and I saw your crosswalks, and I looked at the actual content, and I was just thinking, as a kind of like in the spirit of this cooperation between the RDA groups. So when you kind of like get those crosswalks into to a state where you would like to publish them, then we can maybe help to make them fair.
Okay.
So please,
okay.
I think we should, and I was also thinking we're collecting this case study collection, or create a case study collection of crosswalks, and I think these would be perfect examples for that. So if you would be interested in contributing to that.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. If you haven't, if you could just stick a note in that document, that would be wonderful. I will say that the other thing that also may be related, and this is even more peripheral, so I apologize, is in the FAIR for Research software work, there is a lot of work done on metadata schemas for research software as well, and there's activity that's called Code Meta. And Code Meta basically is a very large crosswalk that then maps to schema.org. And so that may also be something that we should talk about. Okay, any other comments, questions, or suggestions? Yes. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So again, Patrick Ruch, SIB. So I looked at this presentation from this schema from ZenBemed and all these things, and it's still for me a bit unclear in which case you describe a model and in which case you describe an experiment. And the problem is that probably any experiments can result in a model. So, and that's why there is this, by definition, because you may fine tune and then you publish that on any phase. And so that's why there is this positioning. And the other thing is that if you look at the literature, the people that build this language model, then they systematically have this structure, like they will have the ablation, they will have the contamination experiment, they will have this. And this is not reflected in what I see from now, so, which could be added or not, because that you could claim that you only focus on the model and not in the experiments, although any experiments may result in a model. Yeah.
Right. So let's see. I can try to answer a couple of different aspects of it. I think on the latter part, when we started doing this work, we were not really thinking of large language models. We were really thinking of machine learning models in a much larger sense, and of which those are kind of one piece. But I think that's part of the answer, is that we were thinking of like a neural network that does object detection in astronomical data that's collected in a telescope overnight, and right. So things that are, or I don't know, cancer screening and right. So anyhow, so a lot of these were kind of much more basic, I don't know, computer vision, or like image processing models, different kinds of models, and we weren't really thinking of generative models at the point that we started. And so I think if we want to try to be general to all models, then I'm not sure that your last comment about what happens in the large language models is general to all models. So that's, I could say that. I'm not sure. Maybe this is something that we should talk about separately. The model versus the experiment piece, I think, is a good point.
Is it possible today to do the model without leveraging foundation model? That's the question.
I think again, in a lot of areas and a lot of kinds of models, yes. If we're just talking about large language models, then maybe the answer is no. So. Okay, so let's wrap up. I heard applause next door, so we don't want to be behind the next door people in the lunch line. So if you do have ideas about new task forces, please do let us know. Add notes in the document. We will look at that afterwards. If there's a task force that you're interested in and you'd want to co-lead that, that's even better. If you don't want to co-lead it, but you just want to suggest it, we can see if somebody else wants to co-lead it, and that's fine as well. Again, if you're interested in trying to work on either of the two different task forces that exist, whether that's tweaking them, contributing to them, testing them, something else, then we're also quite welcome of your participation. Again, just to repeat this, if you join the mailing list in the RDA group, then you get the emails. The monthly meetings alternate between what I would say is kind of European, well, I don't know, actually. These two times that are friendly for people in somewhere. And we do send reminders before each of the meetings to the mailing list to say this meeting's coming up in a couple of days. Join the task forces. Yep, I think that's basically where we are, and thank you.